Welcome in, everyone. It's HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson, and this will be our pre-game. It's actually a preview. I was going to do this, the Lipscomb, Arkansas season opener for the Razorbacks, second game for the Bison on Wednesday, 7 o'clock Central Time at Bud Walton Arena in Fayetteville. That game will be televised, available live stream on SEC Network Plus. I was going to do a pregame show on game day and decided to bump it up to today. And so we'll call it a preview. Either way, the season's finally here. There's been a lot going on since John Calipari was hired. A lot of that has to do with this high level of recruiting. Then, we got glimpses of the team and the two tip-off tour events in October, mid-October. And then you had the two exhibition games, which was a mixed bag. But now it's real. Everything gets real. And again, Lipscomb and then Arkansas's opponent on Saturday, 8th-ranked Baylor, both of those teams had games last night in the official first day of the college basketball season. So those two got a head start. Lipscomb stays on the road. The Bison coming off a 77-72 road win over Duquesne. Some takeaways from that when we look at what Lipscomb was last year under Lenny Acuff, a really good mid-major coach. Lipscomb favored to be the team to win the ASUN, the Atlantic Sun Conference this year after winning 20 games and finishing third in that league a year ago. Several players back from the team that gave Arkansas, granted, a not very good Razorback team a year ago in North Little Rock, another place where Arkansas struggles sometimes despite, it doesn't matter which major opponent it is. Sometimes Arkansas hung on for a 3-point win in a game that was back and forth late. But so you got a lot of factors going on when you look to this first game. Everybody wants to talk about Baylor and Arkansas. Baylor, some of the luster off a preseason top 10 ranking, taken off last night in a 38-point loss, gave up 101 points on the road to Gonzaga. Baylor was shorthanded. We're going to do a preview show for Arkansas-Baylor later in the week, but I'm just trying to get everybody acquainted with where we're at coming into Tuesday. Election day, a lot going on. Know a lot of people are busy with that. Let's talk a little hoops, though, and get your mind off of some of that stuff, because I know the election results are going to keep me up probably all night paying attention to that stuff. I'm fascinated by it. But it's going to be a busy week for me. I'm going to be off to Fayetteville tomorrow to cover the Razorback season opener against Lipscomb. I'll be covering an NBA game. I have media credentials this season with some different NBA organizations. I'll be covering an NBA game later in the week, and I'll stay on the road, and I'll be in Dallas at American Airlines Center for Arkansas-Baylor on Saturday. So be on the road a lot, but I am going to crank out another one of these to preview Baylor. But let's talk, today about this Arkansas-Lipscomb matchup. And I want to point out, I will give a brief recruiting update as we approach now. We're less than, tomorrow will mark a week out from the start of the beginning of the week-long early signing period in November 13th to the 20th. And there's a little dead period in here, November 11th through 14th, kind of overlapping the start of that. So there's things to talk about in recruiting. But let's look at Lipscomb. I kind of hit some of the highlights in terms of why Lipscomb has our attention after what the Bison did last year. Again, different coaching staff. It was a bad Arkansas team, and we saw Arkansas struggle against mid-majors and even lost one at home in non-conference in November to North Carolina Greensboro. But Lipscomb almost did the trick in North Little Rock, and they returned some players. Will Pruitt, a 6'2 guard, averaged 15 points a game last season, scored 15 against Arkansas last year, scored 15 Monday night, last night in the road win over Duquesne. He and Joe Anderson, another guard who's really the point guard. Pruitt's kind of a combo. Joe Anderson played against the Hogs last year and was one of those players in the lineup that gave Arkansas fits. Last night didn't shoot the ball particularly well, but 8 big assists to lead that win. A couple of other players on the front line, 6'8", 6'11", that competed against Arkansas last year that are back this season. But their best player is a 6'8 forward who did not play last year. He's got a 9 or 10 letter last name. It starts with O. I will butcher it because I can tell you the vowels and consonants are arranged in a way chronologically that give me trouble with enunciation and getting it right. So we're going to call him Jacob's his first name. I can say that. Jacob O, a 6'8 forward, averaged 17.7 points per game and over 4 rebounds 2 years ago. Didn't play last year, thus didn't compete against Arkansas. But 30 big points in the season opener last night. He's a guy that can stretch the floor. You add him to some of the other pieces that Lipscomb's brought back. And then you throw in another transfer, Guy C. Powell, a 6'3" guard transfer from the Atlantic Center within that conference from Jacksonville. Double-figure score in this opening game win last night for Lipscomb. So he's fitting in, was a starter in that game as well. So Lipscomb's a team, when you look at them, just look at them from last year, and you look at their numbers in this game. Last year, one of the better scoring teams, a top 20 scoring team in the country, 82 points per game. They got 77 on the road last night, but they're really good. They're very efficient when you look at their 2-point field goal shooting, their 3-point field goal shooting. They don't foul a lot, so they don't put teams at the free throw line a lot. I think the trade-off there is they're not very physical, and so they're not really that good defensively either when you look at it numerically. So they're not putting up a lot of resistance. And again, part of that is they do keep the fouling at a minimum, but then they don't they don't put up a lot of resistance inside and out. It comes down to the efficiency of your own team and kind of measuring yourself on what your strengths are. But if you want to score in the 80s, if you're Lipscomb, that's just fine with John Calipari and these Razorbacks playing at home. We know this team wants to get into primary and secondary transitions as their focal points to score. It's not been a good 3-point shooting team when you look at Arkansas in the preseason, the exhibition season. Part of that's the slow, rust shake off by Nellie Davis, who's projected to be Arkansas's not only likely leading scorer, but their best 3-point shooter, over 41% last year for Florida Atlantic. I mean, he combined for 13 points in the 2 exhibition games and didn't shoot well. I think about 5 of 18 from the field, and I think he did hit 2 or 3 threes in there. But so far, Nellie Davis, you're looking for him to maybe thaw out against a team where the game should get up and down, and he'll have opportunities not only to score in transition, but maybe take advantage of a defense that can be softish for Lipscomb. But Lipscomb does a really good job offensively. The efficiency's there when you look at it, and that showed up again last night. Over 50% from the field against Duquesne, over 40% from 3 on volume. I think they were 9 of 21. What Lipscomb does a really good job of is ball movement on the perimeter to get defenders out of position, and then they read and counter off of what defenses do. They'll look to get their 3-point shots up. They'll also look to get in those gaps after ball movement on drives. And then they kind of pick and choose. They have some on their perimeter passing game when the ball moves crisply. They also have players that are backdoor cutting, and they try to hit those for easy scores. If they do get into their drive game again, they're waiting to see where the cracks are in the defense and the gaps. They drive. And if there's not a scoring opportunity in the paint, they will kick out with guys offsetting and setting up for that. So everything that they have a really good design offensively, and their players they play to roles and they buy in. I mean, again, it's a team that won 20 games a year ago, won 11 games in its conference. Arkansas is going to be favored and should win this game. We've seen Calipari teams struggle against mid-majors while he was at Kentucky. Last year, Calipari's team lost in December at home to Wilmington. We mentioned Arkansas losing to North Carolina Greensboro. The Razorbacks later would beat Wilmington in December, but Wilmington was a team that went in, North Carolina Wilmington, and upset Kentucky. Lipscomb's worthy of going on the road and winning a game like this. Arkansas can't afford to look ahead to Baylor, and I don't think Calipari's going to let that happen. Remember, this is the official opening of the Calipari era at Arkansas. It's his 4th high major program to lead, spanning 4 decades now. He's been entrenched, enshrined as a Naismith Hall of Fame coach for over a decade. So that he's not. There's nothing left to prove other than for a resume, other than for himself. And again, I've mentioned before the way I've read the tea leaves and just observing him, the recruiting efforts, how they put this roster together. I don't get the feeling like he's at Arkansas to cash some more checks as much as he is to find a way to get back to that postseason success that he's had prior to the previous 5 years, because he's continued with a few outliers to be really good in the regular season. Again, the recruiting's top shelf. It's just where do things land in postseason? Well, we're a long way from March, but you start building your resume this week. Even despite that 38-point loss for Baylor, the Bears today, just in KenPom's analytics, were ranked 26th in those rankings. Arkansas was 29th. So Baylor's still ahead there. So Arkansas's got plenty of resume building, especially at a neutral site against a top 10 rated team. And we also, one of the things I think when we talked about what helped Arkansas going on the road to play TCU, and we'll talk about this when we actually preview Baylor a little bit later, I'll give you a taste of it. not only did you get familiarity with the Dallas area and your routine on the road with a new program and a new coach, and basically a brand new assembled roster, you'll get to repeat some of those things and maybe had some routines built up for some comfort level when you face uh, Baylor and Dallas. But maybe another learning point, and I won't talk much about it because I really want to focus more on Lipscomb, is that Arkansas maybe was scoreboard watching even in the exhibition season. You beat Kansas by 16, the number one rated team, albeit shorthanded. And on that same weekend, TCU gets rolled up against Texas and San Antonio, 80-52, a 28-point loss. Was there some overconfidence going into that game? It was a road game, different. You don't have your comfort level at home. Were you scoreboard watching a little bit? Arkansas got stung at the end of that game. The game became a grind affair. Arkansas 39 points in the first half. And then it was a 66-65 final. So only what was it, 26 points scored in the second half. A tale of two halves. So there's lessons to be carried over from that to Lipscomb, let alone Baylor. But you can't afford a scoreboard watch is the point. And so the point was, just because TCU got walloped by Texas and Arkansas beat Kansas didn't mean Arkansas would have a cakewalk against the Horned Frogs. And maybe they've learned that lesson and won't make the same mistake looking at that score Baylor suffered. And Baylor was shorthanded as well. Again, we're going to deep dive into that. But what can Arkansas carry over? We talked a little bit about Lipscomb. What can Arkansas extract from its successes in both games and some failures in both games, even against Kansas, where Arkansas won by 16, scored 85 points, was efficient on offense, not from the three-point line, really good at the free throw line. But there were some areas where Arkansas can do better. The offensive glass. Arkansas lost that battle in both games. Small margins losing in second chance points. But when a game is close and it comes down to the final few possessions inside of 4 minutes, those small margins can be the difference between winning and losing. That was the case against TCU. Arkansas has been better in transition in both games, but I would argue should have been even better. Those were small margins as well, even in the win over Kansas. Only a +6 there in transition. You'll take that in a 16-point win. But -6 in turnovers against TCU. And, that really hurt Arkansas's margin in transition scoring. I think only +3 there. Points of the paint, Arkansas hasn't won one of those battles yet. They were minus in the game again. Then one of the games they were even, and the other game they were minus another small margin. A lot of that's been because Jonas Adu, the All-SEC big man, the most physical player at 6'11", a guy who does most of his work in the paint at both ends of the floor. A lot of that has to do with him being out. The update today, and Chuck Martin, assistant coach, it's his turn this week to do the preview. It's been Chin Coleman and Kenny Payne prior to that, associate head coaches, tandem of associate head coaches. Today it was Chuck Martin. Martin gave basically the same update. It's day to day. He's getting better. We're hopeful. We'll see. He'll be reevaluated tomorrow. Not the most promising report. It doesn't mean he won't be available. Some of that may be gamesmanship with coaches not wanting to show their full hand to any opponent, or it just could be that they really aren't at a place where they feel confident that he's going to be ready. And again, you got to make choices. Last night, going back to Baylor was without a veteran guard, Langston Love. He was a game day decision. He's been cleared. He suffered an injury back in the NCAA tournament in March. Has been dealing with that ankle. And he's been out and working back. They cleared him to play, but then it was a game time decision. He did not play. Is there a similar thing going on here with Jonas Adu in Arkansas as we approach tomorrow night's game in Fayetteville? So we're going to find maybe more out tomorrow. But as it stands now, some of the problems Arkansas's had in those two exhibition games, you can draw a direct line to the absence of Jonas Adu the way I see it. And so that will impact things. Maybe not as much against Lipscomb, a team, again, that's not going to be better than Arkansas physically, most likely. I mean, I guess that could be proven wrong, but just looking at it on paper and what I remember of Lipscomb, that it wasn't really a physical part of their game that translates to differences in winning and losing and being in a game. But Baylor's a different animal, and that's coming up fast. So is Adu available? Some of the other things Arkansas really needs to work on. I mentioned turnovers. Low turnovers in first halves of both of these two games, exhibition games, and then 10 turnovers each in the second halves. It ended up costing Arkansas the game, I think. That was a big part of it. down the stretch against TCU. Martin talked about the Horned Frogs being more physical, and some of that Arkansas got rattled and coughed the ball up, and that those transition margins shrunk. Again, Arkansas 39 first half points, 8-point lead, built up a 13-point lead late in the third quarter. Then a 10-0 run by TCU moving into the first 2 minutes from the third quarter into the first 2 minutes of the fourth quarter, got it to a one-possession game, and Arkansas was never able to pull away TCU with a 5-0 run in the last 2:38. Arkansas was unable to score, and the TCU did just enough to end up winning that game. And so you can learn a lot from these things. I think, again, without Adu, it speaks a lot to the lack of control on the glass. Arkansas did get better in overall rebounding, which was one of my keys coming from Kansas, where they were -1 to +5 overall against TCU, but still losing on the offensive glass and still losing those tight margins and second chance points. A lot of that's Adu. But going back to the turnovers, that's on everybody. And you look at what Boogie Flan and DJ Wagner did against Kansas, 46 points, efficient shooting, efficient at the free throw line, minimized turnovers in that game when you look at them collectively. Didn't shoot the ball well against TCU. I thought, not having been at the game, but watching highlights and talking to people that did see it, Arkansas's young guards didn't hold up as well against TCU's effort. Their defensive effort, the backcourt, that was a team a year ago under Jamie Dixon. It's really good at generating steals and points off turnovers, getting easy scores. And that happened again in that game, especially late down the stretch. But 8 combined turnovers between Wagner and Flan. They're going to have to start correcting that. In a fast-paced game and playing at that tempo, you're going to see some turnovers. It could be a track meet tomorrow night against Lipscomb. I think that favors Arkansas. Then you want to see, can they clean it up? They've been good in first halves. Again, a combined 7 turnovers, only 7. When you look at 20 minutes first half against Kansas and the 20 minutes against TCU. So 7 turnovers in those 40 minutes. But the back 40, second 20 against Kansas, second 20 against TCU, a combined 20 turnovers, 10 in each. So there's, you can't even in a small sample size say there was an outlier there. It's pretty, in 2 games, it was a consistent theme. So you want to correct some of those things and play your best. The other thing is you might not play your best and struggle with some stuff against Lipscomb and still win. And then you hope you learn from that and can fix some things and patch some things up in time for Baylor. But you'd rather get a head start on getting some of those things corrected and show better in some of those areas. Nelly Davis still hasn't gotten on track. We talked about that. Martin said he missed about 3 weeks of practice leading up to getting cleared and getting back. And I think it showed. He doesn't look comfortable, hasn't looked comfortable in the offense. He was a little bit better against TCU, but the volume isn't there yet. And, there's a long way to go in terms of putting a performance together. It could be tomorrow night, but just if you were just going off of those 2 games, you'd say there's some things that are missing. It doesn't feel like it's just one little thing or 2. It seems like his comfort level is not quite there yet. Now he continues to be a blue collar guy when you look at hustle plays, rebounding, some of the stuff he does defensively. Somehow he was a box score -12 against TCU. That was the worst on the team. But again, I wasn't there. I don't have an eye test to explain that or to understand it. I just know that that's what the box score said. So there's a dynamic there. Adu Thero busted out with a 20-point game. 7 rebounds, I think 4 assists, did a lot. Arkansas blocked 10 shots against TCU after only having 1. With Hunter Dickinson not in that game against Kansas, only 1 block shot, up that to 10. So there were some positives defensively in some of the rim protection, not necessarily physicality, but Arkansas's got a lot of length and athleticism in that front court. When you look at Thero, Big Z, and Trevor Brazil, Adu would only add to that. Again, where does that stand? I also think Carter Knox has done really good things in both exhibition games. So I continue to see he started both. Nelly playing off the bench. We'll see. I think I've been reporting in my previews of these games, my written ones, that I believe Nelly Davis should be in that starting group, but it hasn't happened yet. We'll see if that happens Wednesday night, if that's a dynamic that's different. But Carter Knox has started both games, and I felt like at 6'6", he's done some good things, not only as a finisher in transition, but running that baseline and getting to the dunker spot and making plays, attacking the glass, trying to help Arkansas in ways. And he's a physical freshman. I mean, he's got a good frame, and I think it's going to really help Arkansas only get better this year. And then, Billy Richmond, he's probably played the fewest minutes of any of the 9 in the rotation, but did some good things in the first half, finishing at the rim in concert with Knox. I think Knox fed him with an alley-oop pass for a dunk. So, there you have it. I think with Brazile, he had led Arkansas with 9 rebounds, a game-high 9 rebounds or team-high against TCU. The offense, we haven't seen a whole lot there from him yet. We'll see if he's continues to be up and down on that end of the court, but you like to see the 9 rebounds. Again, Arkansas +5 in the overall rebounding game against TCU. It's that offensive glass and figuring out a way to win those battles, comparing your offensive work on the glass to the opponent. That's where Arkansas's coming up short. And again, remember, Jonas Aidoo, when you look at his rebounding, little over 7 a game, it's even more impressive when you realize he played less than 25 minutes a game last year at Tennessee. So when you start extrapolating a bigger role or bigger minute role, those numbers go up. It's not to say he won't be used similarly at Arkansas when you look at his minutes, but when he's out there, his volume is better than when you look at the 7, which is already good, nice. It's even a little bit better when you start realizing that a lot of guys that are putting up similar rebounding numbers are playing 30+ minutes. So I kind of look at it that way. All right, 21 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. If you've done it already, please hit subscribe, like, and share. Really, my biggest takeaways then for Arkansas is kind of maybe trying to solve and get better in some of those areas we just went through. The 3-point shooting I didn't spend a lot of time on, but 27%. Arkansas was 13 of 48 from 3 combined in those 2 games. No outlier in either game, both sub 30% shooting in each game. Again, a lot of that to me is Nelly Davis, and him not going yet. After seeing Boogie Flynn just light up those 2 tip-off tour events, I was at both Pine Bluff and Hot Springs. Yeah, they're shooting drills, but there was some 5-on-5, even though it was against GAs. I mean, the guy was taking tough shots and making tough shots, and he shot at a really high clip, and we just didn't see it in the exhibition season. As good as Flynn was against Kansas, he was efficient overall, not from 3. The same thing showed up against TCU, another off night for him there. And so you got to feel like that's going to improve. DJ Wagner was a mixed bag, 2 of 4, low volume against Kansas, 50%. You'll take that. Only took 3 against against TCU, missed all 3. And he's a guy I've said over and over again prefers to get into his drive game. That's why I think with he and Fland in tandem, 1-2. I like Fland more on the ball. He led Arkansas assists in the 2 games, 5 each. But I like him more on the ball than Wagner off the ball, and then getting into his drive game after reading those situations on offside 2-man game and just sizing up a defender, because he does have a strong bully ball drive game. Not to say Wagner can't run your team and get them into some good stuff, because he did at Kentucky last year. Just to say when they're on the floor together, maybe Fland more so running through him. And again, there's going to be opportunities for stuff to run through Nelly Davis. We just haven't seen that yet. We have not seen much of a package there for him in terms of running ISO through him. We have seen some sets run for him. And again, he was a little bit better on again, small volume against TCU, excuse me, than he was against Kansas. So that's maybe a progression there. And I think one of the biggest things is we talked about Arkansas being a front runner, getting off to a great start against Kansas, and really keeping a lead. And every time Kansas made a mini run, it never got within 2 or 3 possessions, really. And Arkansas would go on its own run. It started on defense, get down in transition, and then push leads back to double digits, 1 by 16. What were they going to do when they were challenged and it being a close game and a dogfight? Well, we saw how that devolved late in the last 11 minutes against TCU. So you never know. Can Lipscomb do what it did last year and take Arkansas to the wire? So we talked about these bigger picture categories, facets of the game: offensive rebounds, turnovers, transition, yada, yada, yada. But at the end of the day, what plays are you making, whether it's diving on the floor for a ball or executing on offense? Where are these things when it comes down to the closing minutes? It was not there. Arkansas went scoreless the final 2:38 against TCU, and it hadn't been very good in the 8 minutes prior to that. So we're not sure how close Lipscomb's going to be at the end, but Arkansas could have another test in that measure in a tight game late as soon as Wednesday. If not, It's most likely to happen against Baylor. Again, don't scoreboard watch. Baylor was on the road. The Bears weren't full-handed, and the lesson, there's a lot of value in that lesson from even TCU getting blown out against Texas by 28 and then coming back and surprising Arkansas and being the better team late, taking command of that game, and physicality was a big part of that. All right, so those are things we're keeping an eye on. Again, if I look at this, obviously everybody wants to go 2-0 to close out the week, and if you did that, you'd have a quality quad 1 win at a neutral side against a top 10 ranked team. 1-1 may be the safest betting line. Not to say that Arkansas goes into it looking at it that way. I'm just saying Arkansas went 1-1 in exhibition season. Is this a 1-1 week or a 2-0 week? I don't see 0-2. I think Arkansas gets the Calipari era officially off on the right foot Wednesday against Lipscomb, and then you see what lessons are learned and how much improvement there is. And where does Jonas Adu fit into this? Is he back this week at all? Is he back for the entire week or part of it? How does that play into it? But just kind of wrapping it now, 26 minutes in, that's where I stand. So I'm going to go ahead and predict an Arkansas win. I think this should be a game Arkansas wins by double figures, maybe in the 10 to 15 point range. If they're not great, if they're really good like they were against Kansas, it's probably a similar margin, if not better. So outside of that 15 point range, all bets are off if Lipscomb's still in the game late, because Arkansas, and its only challenge we've seen in granted exhibition season, did not respond. Maybe they will. I'd still think however they get it done, if it's a tight game, you might win by a possession or two and count yourself lucky. Again, Lipscomb's a worthy mid-major. All right, real quick on recruiting, because I want to get out of here when we hit 30 minutes. I'm at 27 minutes. Malik Thomas, it was announced, was it yesterday? God, these days are running together. It seems like a week ago. Malik Thomas, the 5-star, top 10 rated 5-star out of Pittsburgh, overtime elite now in Atlanta for his senior season. Arkansas, we've been saying it for a while, class of 2025, Arkansas's in the driver's seat. I've reported source information that he committed to the staff shortly, about a week or so after his official visit in early October. And then he put out his final 3. He had a final 7. He's cut that down to 3. It's Arkansas, UConn, the last school he visited prior to visiting Arkansas, all the way back in June. And then Pittsburgh, the hometown school. Typically, when I hear about a private commit, when we found out that he stopped taking visits and now he's cut it to 3, the announcement's expected to be made next week, Monday, the November 11th. So that is interesting because the early signing period runs again November 13th through the 20th. I've always said, based on the source info I've gotten, he's expected to sign early. I believe Arkansas is in full command here. I never say 100% on anything. Some of his circumstances in his recruiting were a little bit interesting when it was going back and forth with UConn. That's always something I've raised an eyebrow to, especially when he still, at the time, had a visit on the table to State before I found out and got source information that he wasn't, Kansas State had supposedly canceled on him. But it was, within a day or the same day that I reported on one of these segments that he had actually told the staff he's going to be a Razorback, the Arkansas staff. But he, when he was being recruited, pursued so heavily by UConn, some mixed messages there, and he still wanted to take some visits, including Kansas State, because of the big NIL offer that was supposedly on the table for him if he shows up. So there were some dynamics there that don't get me to 100% on this. I'm about as close as you get, but I never am. I never say with absolute anything that I'm 100%. Something's going to happen until I see it happen. But I'm about as close as you can get. Malik Thomas will come off the board and call the Hogs in less than a week. And Arkansas then will have 2 top 10 rated 5-star guards committed in this class. It is the best recruiting class in the country when you're talking backcourt, in my opinion. Darius Acuff Jr., top 5 rated. Malik Thomas ranked 7th. So 2 guards in the top 7. No other program will be able to boast that. Acuff, we know, has been committed since late July. Those guys will both sign early. And I've said over and over again, I've reported this for weeks, that Arkansas staff feels good about having at minimum 2, maybe even 3 signees during the early period. I think some question marks remain not only with Caleb Wilson, who said he was going to visit this past weekend, Then as the weekend got closer, his dad said he wouldn't make it. Arkansas had that road game Friday night in basketball against TCU. Football Hogs debacle at Reynolds Razorback Stadium on Saturday. Probably best not to have a visitor. We'll see if it gets rescheduled. I'm hearing more and more that people think maybe he's going to wait to the spring. If he wants to sign early, he's taken most of his visits. And he could still visit Arkansas on a weekend when the Football Hogs host Texas, November 16th. That's on a Saturday. You could have him in that weekend. There's no basketball game that weekend for the Razorbacks, and the early period ends the 13th through the 20th, so that'd be smack dab in the middle of that. So there's still a pathway. When we look at Chris Sinak Jr., he did visit Arkansas. Both of those are kind of those 3-4, those four combo four guys. Caleb Wilson maybe more of a 3-4 in college who can help defend at the 5 because he's so versatile. I think Sinak a little taller and maybe built a little bit better as he adds strength to be more of a 4-5 combo at the college level. Either way, those are two of the frontline options Sinak visited. I've been talking about how LSU, I've never really backed away from the idea that his hometown Baton Rouge LSU is maybe the leader there. There's some talk again. He's visited Tennessee recently. Tennessee's among his 7 finalists. And there's some chatter that maybe Tennessee's in better shape than anybody's talked about. I've kind of had it framed as an LSU, Arkansas, Kentucky trio. Let's go ahead and move Tennessee in there based on some things I'm hearing as being a serious contender. And when Malik Thomas, by the way, put his Final 3 edit from Tipton Edits on his Instagram, I noticed Chris Sinak Jr. put the eyeball emoji on that. These players do stuff like that. Sometimes it means maybe something. Sometimes it doesn't. It is interesting. And again, I think let's include Tennessee now in the conversation for Sinak. And so it could be, can Arkansas get Wilson or Sinak? Well, you got to get Wilson on campus. Nothing's been stated on rescheduling. And again, the more I talk to people, they're not sure either player is going to sign early. I kind of got the impression both of them would, based on how they were taking visits and getting them out of the way. But we'll see. Again, these things are always fluid, especially with 5 stars. 5 stars can drag things out. It's not as pressing for them as lower rated players who also have to be concerned about portal recruiting later. You might miss opportunities with teams that move on and go get a veteran guy. So if they've got an offer now, you get on board, you get it done early. These 5 stars have options. And so nothing surprised me. Again, I do expect Acuff and Malik Thomas, who I expect to commit to Arkansas on Monday, for those two to end up in the early period. Arkansas is hopeful to turn somebody. One guy that could be that guy is Sean Abayev, the top 25 rated 4-star, should be a 5-star in my opinion, combo guard wing at a Fort Lauderdale. Visited Arkansas in a midweek just on the heels of that weekend visit in early October by Malik Thomas. He's got Arkansas in his Final 5. There are some folks out there that cover this nationally recruiting that think Arkansas is in the lead there. He's a guy that maybe Arkansas, if it plays that way, could get done early as well. And that kind of keeps it in that 2 to 3 potential to get it locked up and get them signed early. Calipari always gets some of that, and then he typically also gets some really big names in the spring. So it will be a process. Mika Murnin, another top 10 rated 5-star in the 2026 class on the front line, versatile stretch guy, may reclass to 25. Loved his Arkansas visit, another visitor. That's probably going to carry to the spring. Nate Mint, 2025, top 5 rated, another versatile, wing, maybe a stretch 4 at the college level. He may carry it to the spring. Calipari's been out to see him a lot. And we're repeating some stuff, but I don't know who all's seen us talk about this before. And since there's not an update, I'll just catch us up to where things are. He's another guy that may wait to the spring. And we may, you might hear word of him setting up an Arkansas visit soon. It maybe for that same weekend I talked about where the Hogs host Texas in football. Maybe not. Maybe it's later. Maybe he does truly stretch some of his visits out through the spring. But you hear different talking points. Some people think Sinak might make a decision after the first of the year. Caleb Wilson, more and more, I'm hearing some of these folks say they're not sure it's going to get done early now. They're thinking maybe more spring. Again, these things are fluid because that could prove to be true, or a guy could say, no, fooled you, I'm ready to get it done now. Kentucky's been thought for a while to be the leader for Caleb Wilson. I'm still in that camp. Until he ever makes it to Arkansas's campus, that's a lukewarm interest there to me, even though he said a lot of things, said he was definitely going to visit. He told me that back in July. His dad's raved about Calipari for years. So, you know, proof's in the pudding. You got to get him to campus. Senak's already been there. But again, I think these things may take a little longer, and if they don't, we'll find out soon enough. But I think with Acuff and Malik Thomas, you've locked up the best backcourt in the country in high school recruiting. Abayev will only add to that as a wing and solidify that fact even more. And now, who do you pluck? Who do you pluck out of Wilson, Senak, Ament, and Murinan? Can you get one of those guys, whether it happens now or in the spring? Arkansas is trying to get to 4 quality 5 stars. I think they would expand it to 5 if they could because of how good this class is. And a Murinan, if you move him from 26 to 25. And then there's Isaiah Seeley, ESPN ranked 55th player, 4-star out of Springdale. There are plans for him as well. Potentially, he's got Arkansas in his Final Four, along with Boston College, Ole Miss, and California. And that one, he told me, may take him to the spring. Although I think there's a pathway to get him to get it done early as well. A lot of going on when it's a lot of 5-star and high-rated guys in recruiting. But I'm going to wrap it up now. So it's going to keep it to 30. I stretch it to 36. Thank you one more time for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I will have a preview article for Lipscomb and Baylor. I'm packing all of it into one written article. As soon as I finish here, I'm going to go wrap that up, post it to HogvilleNet.net, tweet it out. I'm going to post it to Pig Trail Nation and KNWA. And it's going to have breakdowns and scouting reports for both Lipscomb and Baylor. I'm packing all of it in because I'm going to be doing a lot of traveling later this week. I'm going to embed this YouTube segment into this article. And then later in the week, I'm going to do another one of these, and I'll embed it back into the article for Baylor. And I'm also going to be tuning in to the preview press conference later in the week for Baylor after this Lipscomb game. And I'll copy and paste quotes from Arkansas's coaching staff previewing that game, and I'll put it back in the article. So I'm going to be updating it as we go. I'm doing a little bit differently. I'm not giving each game its own preview article. It's just one big one. You can already get a jump start on reading about Baylor and Lipscomb today. My keys to success for Arkansas for both games. And so I have all that lined out here shortly. Hope everyone's doing well. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live one last time. If something breaks and we got to come back, we'll do it sooner. Again, I'll be back on later for a preview show for Baylor. But until next time, take care, and I'll see you then.